Welcome! So today I'm going to show you how I paint this wizard in about 45 minutes for games of Warhammer Fantasy, Mordheim and other systems like that. What we're going to focus on is simple and effective techniques in order to get this guy out as quickly and efficiently as possible. So you'll notice I'm starting with a corn red base coat for his robes. I envision this guy as a fire wizard, and so gonna start by using a deeper red just to cover all of his clothing. You'll notice I've almost immediately swapped over to a bigger brush. This is another great way of saving time, especially at this early stage where we really don't have to be that neat. Just gonna whack on the red everywhere and not really worry if it gets onto other bits like, his staff, his clothes, sorry, his face. It's supposed to go on his clothes because we're gonna tidy that up later. Now just swapping back to our regular brush in order to get those harder to reach areas. And manage to drop the man and break him. After he's repaired, we then move on to our browns. So we're going to use a darker brown, a Doom Bull brown from Citadel, in order to base coat all of the different browns. What we're going to do later is differentiate them slightly with how we highlight and how we layer up, but we're going to use a common base coat for them all. And again, picked a darker brown here, because we're going to try and use as few washes as possible on this run through. Washes are great, they're a very good way of adding definition and contrast, but they take time to dry. And so with this chap, I'm going to use washes very sparingly so that we can continue working on him pretty much continuously. In addition to the staff, going to make sure that we cover other areas that should be brown, such as his boots. A little bit tricky accessing these. Just take your time and make sure you're getting into all of those hard to reach areas. After the boots, also going to put some brown on his belt, which goes across his red clothes. You can't see this too much in the final product, but it helps, I think, to break up his otherwise very red clothing a little bit. He's also got these greaves or braces, I don't know what you'd call them. Going to put those in a brown as well. And in both those places, the brown helps to complement the red while providing a bit of a different colour. So next, moving on to the flesh. On this guy, the main bits of his flesh are his face and his hands. So we're going to put those in now. Because of this paint being a little bit less thick, might be the word. You probably will need a couple of coats on this. So again, take your time. At this point, we want to be a bit more careful. We don't want to be spilling back over onto colours that we've already painted. But if we do a little bit, that's fine. That's not the end of the world. We can tidy those up once we're layering. This guy's got quite a big forehead. He has a receding hairline, which I can relate to. And so just making sure that that is all covered with our flesh tone. So next, I decided I want the skull at the top of this guy's staff to be an off-white, so using Ushapti bone. Reason I picked this colour is because it's quite different. It stands out from the predominantly red and browns that we've got elsewhere. Adds a little bit of visual interest, goes on fairly nicely too. And then we're moving to a polished silver, a speed paint, in order to paint on the metal areas, mostly being his sword. The reason I'm using a speed paint just because the consistency and the flow is really nice. So enjoy using these when I'm painting my metals. So we're not going to use a wash for much, but we are going to put a little bit of wash on his flesh areas on the silver in order to just add a little bit of definition to those areas. They're going to be harder to layer because of their size, and so a wash can do the hard bit for us. And then the last base coat we have to fill in is a red. So using our good brush to carefully border the areas in red, which are going to be adjacent to other colours like the bone and the silver. Using Mephiston red for this one of my favourite paints, I think. And then we're just going to grab an old brush and use it to fill in the rest of the area. Because these flame effects are really textured, it really helps to be able to just shove a brush in there, not be too gentle with it, in order to make sure that we've got all the nooks and crannies red. And there's a couple of hard to reach areas I'm just touching up with a brush. So, nearly there. One more colour I'm going to add on is a contrast black region, just for his hair. I thought I'd have this guy have black hair, again, just so the black really contrasts with the reds and browns that we have elsewhere. So now we're approaching the point, after we put in this guy's moustache, where our base coats are all done. We're then going to move on to layering, which is one of the ways that we're going to quickly make this guy look quite good. What I find is layering works really well with robes, so what this guy has a lot of, whereas other methods like speed paints don't work as much. And so what we've done is, or what we're doing is using a watered down Mephiston red in order to pick out the highlights. I think if we're being fancy we'd call this volumetric highlights, but just think of the areas where light would hit. It can help sometimes to look at the model from above to see where these are, especially under a bright light, and just fill this in with the Mephiston red. So because we've thinned this paint quite a bit, it's going to dry really quickly. And by the time we work our way round all of this guy's robes, the first area should be more or less dry. I also find this really satisfying as a process. So moving up from the bottom of his robes to the middle bit, and then finally adding that red up at the top as well, the back of his, shall we call it, extended collar. Doing the same again on the front here. There are some bits where our flesh overspilled onto the collar, really easy just to fix that with our highlighting here. And just being a bit careful to avoid any of the darkest shadows, while layering up some of that lovely Mephiston red on the higher areas. Good. So now what we're going to do now is go back and essentially do that again. So we've lightened up some of our areas. We're going to use the exact same paint and the exact same technique to layer up a lighter shade of red over it. One thing we're going to try and do now is cover less area than we did the first time. So running our brush, putting paint over fewer bits of his cloth, focusing more on the raised bits, and that'll help build up a nice effect, a nice gradient from the darker red up to the lighter one. And you could kind of do this process as many times as you want. I guess the more times you do it, the nicer gradient you'd get, but I'm happy with 2 for now. The only other thing I'm going to do is add some Troll Slayer orange into that red, just to bring up some of the highest highlights, shall we say, and boost the contrast a little bit. So just like before, going over the raised surfaces, picking out an even smaller spot than we had before. With a model like this, I find focusing and spending a lot of effort making one area look good, so in this case his robes, helps elevate the entire model, and is a good way of getting decent models out quickly. We're not going to spend that much time on his face, on his staff. They're all kind of lower yield when we have this nice cloak to work with. So just working up the back of his cloth, the back of his long collar, and his raised collar as well. And there we've got a pretty decent looking red robes. So I was going to do the same thing for the flames and layer them up using a brush, but I realised there was a much faster way of doing this, and that's grabbing a dry brush. So using some of that same orange, just going to work it into the bristles of a makeup brush I bought for this, wipe off any excess on a tissue, and then dry brush gently over those two raised bits. Here we're really letting the sculpt do the hard work for us, instead of doing this manually. And you'll see this goes on really quickly. So we're slowly building up that colour, trying to focus the lighter colour to the top. And then we're gonna, once that's dried, go back again and hit the raised areas again with just another round of that orange dry brush. So just like we did on the cloth, hopefully creating a nice gradient from the darkest reds up to the top. So now I've mixed a bit of Avalan Sunset with that orange, just to help that gradient become even brighter towards the top of those flames. And then finally using some pure Avalan Sunset right for the extreme edges of this. And so on this model, the flames was another point where we used a really simple and fast technique in order to make the model look good. And it was another area of focus for us. Now we just need to wrap up by doing some quick highlighting on the other bits. So using some Scrag Brown on the staff and on his belt. Just helping put some definition here. But really not spending very long on this at all, or being very precise. Just going to highlight the little raised bit on his braces too, but that's it. Moving on to his shoes, again being very quick with this, just filling out the bits that are most obviously going to be hitting the light. And then switching to the flesh shade in order to do a similar process for the exposed skin this guy has. So again, try not to spend too long, but picking out things like eyebrows, this guy's forehead, and the top of his hands. Finally, just putting some Ashapti bone again back on this guy's skull. And we're coming to the end of this video. So if you did enjoy this, if you found this useful, please like and subscribe. Let me know if there's anything specifically you would like me to try painting next. I'm using this Fire Wizard as William the Warlock for my Mordheim campaign. You might spot some other Mordheim related stuff on my channel too. But that is it. Thank you guys for watching, and on to the showcase.